Hey everyone, it's the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Chris Carter, Brian Batko. We're going to be talking about Will Howard. How excited should Steelers fans be for his arrival? What to be expected out of him realistically? We'll also talk about where Derrick Harmon fits in the line. Does he move to nose? Does Yahya Black move to nose? And we'll take a closer look at those undrafted free agents all here in the North Shore Drive podcast. Let's get into it. You are now listening to the North Shore Drive podcast, a show on all things Pittsburgh sports from the writers of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, hosted by Christopher Carter. Hello and welcome to the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. I'm Chris Carter. He's Brian Batko. We're your Steelers writers, and as always, you can find this show on your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoy it. Subscribe to this channel to get all of your Monday, Wednesday, Friday episodes of the North Shore Drive podcast, as well as the daily content that comes out from all of our sports writers here at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, just like Chipped Ham and Football comes out every Tuesday, hosted by our guy right here, Brian Batko. As always, this show is brought to you by Edgar Snyder Associates. If you're injured in an accident or if you need help with workers' compensation, call Edgar Snyder Associates today at 1-800-94-EDGAR. And remember, there's never a fee unless they get money for you. Brian, there is a lot of excitement by some people in Pittsburgh that the Steelers did draft a quarterback at all, and some people are really excited that it's Will Howard, the national champion quarterback of the Ohio State Buckeyes. They picked him in the 6th round. Now, some people have been calling him Big Ben 2.0. They've been saying that he could be the guy, that he is the future. Why don't they just give this guy a chance at starting quarterback this year after he won a national championship? However, Brian, I'm on the train that I think he's more of a Mason Rudolph 2.0, which isn't a bad thing. You need your backup quarterbacks and your solid quarterbacks. But is there good reason to be hopping on a hype train for Will Howard coming off his college football playoff run?
I mean, there's never really a good reason to be hopping on a hype train, I don't think, for anybody, because that's how we just lose the plot with guys who haven't played a single snap of NFL football yet. But like you said, especially a 6th round pick. And yeah, I would hope it goes without saying that a 6th round pick would be a little bit more likely to have the career of a 3rd rounder than number 11 overall. So let's not get carried away here with some of the comparisons. I know you mentioned the Big Ben one because of the physical similarities, but I mean, was it John Gruden was saying Will Howard reminds him of Josh Allen when they sat down for the Gruden quarterback school, which was kind of interesting to see. I mean, let's not do that to Will Howard. I mean, he's a nice player. I think he did get better as the season went along.
Yeah.
You know, I'll throw another player out at you. And I mean, fans might not want to hear this, and I'm writing about this a little bit for Sunday, part of a bigger piece, but Will Howard kind of reminds me of Kenny Pickett without the 1st round pressure and expectations, because I think a lot of people wondered, okay, and Pitt connection. Because I think a lot of people wondered, like, okay, what would his career trajectory have been if he would have just gone to a school other than the one right across the hall and not been, let's just be honest, reached for, I think, at number 20 in a weak quarterback class. Could things have been different? I see some similarities. Like, Will Howard was a lightly recruited guy out of Eastern PA. He went to Kansas State because he believed in them. He played right away. He took some lumps at times there, and then he transfers up to Ohio State, which I think was kind of a mutual decision between him and Kansas State, because he played well there, but he never really, obviously didn't really get them over the hump. They were still Kansas State and didn't break through. But then with more talent around him, I mean, he goes out and he does lead the Buckeyes to the national title. But again, there was adversity along the way for him. 2 major ones. That Oregon game, I remember that was the night before the Steelers played the Raiders in Vegas. He had that slide that they ran out of time. And then there was the loss to Michigan. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure every Ohio State fan was ready to crucify Will Howard forever because of how much their offense struggled in that one. So all of that being said, he broke out essentially. He had kind of one really good redshirt, and I shouldn't say redshirt, 5th year senior season, much like Kenny did. And I think both guys, the arm talent was, not elite by any stretch, but they kind of had that chip on their shoulder, underdog mentality, and an edge to them and an obsession with football that could be the reason why they work out. It's just that Will Howard is a 6th round pick instead of a 1st round pick. And he's coming from Ohio State, where sure, there's a lot of Steelers fans down there, but there's not that same inherent, bias or, favoritism or whatever you want to call it.
No, I'm right with you there. Like, you look, and I think this is where Will Howard was kind of working against things. And I said this a lot in my live chat on Thursday, was that going into the playoffs, his stock wasn't that high because he lit it up against some bad teams. But like when he played Oregon, like you said, embarrassing loss there, lost to Dylan Gabriel. When he played Penn State, they won, but he didn't look that great in that game. He did look decent against Indiana, which was the number 5 team in the country, but then he looked terrible against Michigan. And so you had a mixed bag in their biggest games of the season. But then I think what really boosts his profile, like you said, is the playoffs. He goes up against Nico Iamaleava and Tennessee, smokes them in the first round. Dylan Gabriel gets that rematch, smokes them in the second round, goes up against Quinn Ewers, beats Texas in the third round, and then goes up against Riley Leonard. So there you have 4 guys that are either a draft pick projected to be next year, or 3 guys that were picked this year in the draft class, and he won those games. So I get people being excited about a big play and a big game quarterback who came in those big moments. But to me, it's about consistency. Yes, he has the height. Yes, he has the speed. And I think he does have the arm strength. But I would need to see him to put it together a lot more often than just 4 games at the end of the season before I start crowning him as some big plan like they should commit to. Because some people are out here saying like, oh, they you know what, they should forgo drafting a quarterback next year and try to just give Will Howard a chance to be the starting quarterback for the future. No, that's why he's picked in the 6th round. Like, I think that he could be a solid backup quarterback that, maybe if he puts it all together, maybe he will be Josh Allen. Maybe he will be Ben Roethlisberger. I don't, but
he probably won't. That seems like a real stretch.
But that's my point, is that the likelihood of that is just so low that you can't bank on it. But this is why you stash him in the 6th round, because now he's on your roster for 4 years at no cost. And if he develops, great. If he doesn't, oh, well, you spent a 6th round pick to get him. And meanwhile, this does not interrupt your plans for what you're doing this year. It doesn't interrupt your plans for drafting a quarterback next year. And he can just be that guy that develops as the young guy on the roster who, if he turns into Mason Rudolph 2.0, which I think would be a really great place for him, then you have your bridge quarterback for if you miss on this next pick.
Yeah. And I mean, I get that it's fun to project ahead to 2026 and, watch some of those quarterbacks. I mean, I've been doing that myself, familiarizing myself with next year's potential class, but we also just don't, there's so much we don't know. We haven't seen Will Howard get a chance with the Steelers. We haven't seen these guys play their 2025 seasons of college football. So like this discourse of like, oh, would you be excited if the Steelers take quarterback X in the 1st round next year? How should I know? I don't know. I haven't seen the guy play next season. I haven't even seen how the quarterback situation has played out for the Steelers this season. So I'm not writing off Will Howard. Yeah, maybe he will get an opportunity and he'll show you something that you can evaluate him and say, okay, now our calculus has changed for what we need to do next year at quarterback. Or maybe he'll show you nothing. And yes, you'll go into next season and say, this isn't a bad spot to be in where we're using much more draft resources on a quarterback with a higher upside, but we still have this guy sitting behind him who is fully capable and might have, more meat on the bone. It would be kind of like the Niners with the Trey Lance and Brock Purdy setup that they had a few years ago. And that's another name that, like, yes, he's a lot. I think Will Howard is maybe a bigger Brock Purdy. Maybe he's a faster, more athletic Mason Rudolph. These are the comparisons that make more sense than trying to fling Big Ben 2.0 or Josh Allen Jr. against the wall. I mean, that's just, you watch those guys play. I mean, I think they pretty clearly had more zip on their ball and more, overall pocket presence and athletic talent than Will Howard did. But again, I'm not necessarily going to bet against the guy because he does seem like a winner if you can put your finger on those intangibles. And he does seem like somebody who, if it doesn't pan out for him in the NFL, it's not going to be because of an attitude issue or anything like that. He's going to work his butt off, and he's probably going to be a pretty nice, rookie to have there in a room that might get kind of crazy here soon if Aaron Rodgers does join the fray.
Will Howard is like when
and Rudolph's like that too. I mean, Mason Rudolph, yes, as you know, Chris, very much go along to get along kind of guy. Maybe he wasn't always early in his career coming in as a 3rd round pick, but man, whether it was the lack of playing time, the depth chart, or the way Ben Roethlisberger approached it, he was humbled pretty quickly.
He was. I mean, he also got like assaulted twice.
Well, that was his second year, of course, once he
Yeah,
actually got real action. So that year became a real, let's say, learning experience, to put it
a
lightly.
humdinger to say the least.
Yeah.
But where I was going to go with this is I think that it's kind of Steelers fans are kind of look like feeling like when you're young and you're just fresh out of college and you need a new car, but you don't have all the money, you go to the used car lot and man, you think like, man, this car could be the car. Like you start looking and you start convincing yourself that all these 2005 models, these 2000, like man, that 2012 looks really nice, man. I'm gonna be looking good driving down the block. But like that's what the Steelers were this year. There weren't a whole lot of good options. They didn't have the resources to trade up and go get Cam Heyward. So you're bargain shopping right now. You're hoping that next year you've got the really good paying job. You've paid off most of your loans. And now you can say, let me holler at the BMWs. Let me holler at the luxury cars. Let me get my Jaguar shopping on. I don't even shop like that. That's Brian Batko car level right there. But that's where I think the Steelers could be, is that they need to be in a better position to look at the high value guys when they're coming out. And that's what it projects to be next year. Doesn't mean it will be, but you'd rather take the chance on that being there next year then go for a draft class that you're pretty confident ain't it, because we've seen the ramifications of when you invest highly in that.
And maybe you'll get 100,000 more miles out of Will Howard, but more than likely he's going to have some minor maintenance issues, and you're going to be taking it to the shop more often than you'd like. So I don't see
you pulling on that for me.
Yeah, I don't really see any downside to taking him in the 6th round. And yes, much like Mason Rudolph coming back as the likely backup, but potentially starter if one Aaron Rodgers decides to call it quits, then they're very like safe, comfortable, conservative plays at the position. And, the Steelers will live to fight and find a quarterback another day, more than likely.
Absolutely. He's Brian Batko. I'm Chris Carter. This is the North Shore Drive podcast. When we come back, we haven't talked a whole lot about Derrick Harmon since he's been drafted after the first night, because we've been doing so much to analyze the rest of the class. I want to talk about where specifically he could fit on the D line. We'll do that next here on the North Shore Drive podcast for the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. But first, I want to remind you, this show is brought to you by Edgar Snyder Associates, who also do workers' compensation. When you've been hurt on the job, who decides when you're better? Who decides when your treatment's over? And who decides when your benefits are over? The answer might surprise you. It's the insurance company's doctors. How does that make you feel? Probably not great, because you want someone to be on your side. That's where Edgar Snyder Associates comes in, because they'll be on your side. Call them today at 1-800-94-EDGAR, because they'll always fight for their workers' compensation rights that you deserve. And remember, there's never a fee unless they get money for you. We're back here on the North Shore Drive podcast for the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Chris Carter, Brian Batko. Brian, let's take a look at the Steelers' D-line projected to be in the next year. They let go of Montravius Adams earlier this week. So Carl Dunbar talking about, you need to eat your food when it comes to guys earning times there. I think that Derrick Harmon is definitely going to see a lot of playing time this year, but I think there's some people out there that think that he's just going to be plugged in at the nose and that's going to be that. Carl Dunbar made it pretty clear that Keeanu Benton is not out of the rotation, or even not maybe even the top maybe is the top consideration for the Steelers at nose last year. Where do you see Harmon fitting in, and what do you think about how Carl Dunbar described the Benton at the nose? Because he didn't exactly do a great job in the playoffs when he was being the guy double teamed in the hole.
Yeah, I mean, I think Benton, if anything, maybe this means for him, okay, 2 years in, there was some optimism that maybe he'd find that next level, and he'd have some juice getting after the passer in addition to being stout against the run. Maybe now it's more likely to be just kind of the solid run defender, and any flashes of pushing the pocket in the passing game will just kind of be a bonus. Whereas with Harmon, I keep coming back to Mike Tomlin's quote on the previous Tuesday before the draft, and not the ones about Shedeur Sanders' competitive spirit and all that. But when he talked about the guys at the top of the draft, I think it was your question, Chris, asking about nose tackles or specific defensive line alignments. And I mean, this is, I think, very much a Mike Tomlin philosophy, and probably a league-wide philosophy, but those animals that he called them at the top of the draft, I mean, they can do everything. You better not take a guy that high and worry about, okay, is he going to be playing the 5-tech, 3-take? Should he just be able to shade over the gut? Like, no, he anywhere you put him, he should wreak havoc. So I think that's kind of what they're expecting out of Derrick Harmon. And, Keeanu Benton was a second rounder and a mid to late second rounder at that. So maybe he doesn't have quite that same ceiling. I think that's fair to say. I think we kind of knew that at the time. He was more of the nuts and bolts pick than a sexy or flashy swing for the fences pick at that juncture of the draft. So nice player, but that might just be what he is, and that's his role in the rotation. Derrick Harmon, I just went and looked this up. I think comparing him to someone that might make sense is Stephon Tuitt when he came in in 2014. Yeah. Similar body types, a little on the younger side, maybe a little bit of rawness to some extent. He played 40% of the snaps out of the gate. So if that's where Harmon settles in as a first-round pick versus a second-round pick, who I think, obviously I wasn't covering the NFL or the Steelers at the time, but right. I think Stephon Tuitt had first-round talent. I think a lot of people would have told you that, but there were just some other questions that caused him to fall. So 40% of the snaps, maybe a little bit more for Harmon, that could be realistic in year one.
No, I think so too. I think that's very realistic, and like I've been saying this, since they got him, he won't start over Benton or Heyward if they're doing like their 2-down, their nickel packages.
At least not right away, yeah.
Right, not right away. But here's the other thing: is that the third guy in that rotation gets a ton of snaps. Like they rotate D lines so much now because of the pace of the NFL. You can't just live with the same guy all game long. So he's gonna get his looks. I think that there's some things that you look at here and you think, hey, are there questions? Sure, but he's gonna get his chances to play this year. So if I'm a Steelers fan, I'm thinking like, oh, he's gonna be held back. I think the amount of held back will just simply be he won't be announced in the starting lineups some days. But I think that he's absolutely going to get a ton of snaps. And like you said, I think he is going to move into the nose occasionally, but it's going to be one of those, they're going to be moving guys around trying to find where they actually want to be.
At the rotational positions, by and large, Steelers' first-round picks have been eased in, if you want to call it that. Najee Harris is maybe an exception to that, but they drafted him to be the featured running back, and he was the featured running back from the jump. But you look at somebody like Devin Bush in 2019 as an inside linebacker. That's actually a spot where you can be an every down green dot guy, and they didn't project that for him right away. He settled into that year two before his injury, but that's somebody who I think his playing time also could be somewhat similar to what Harmon is getting himself into here, or Terrell Edmonds. He was kind of forced into duty full time sooner than a lot of people thought, but came in initially as, okay, he's gonna be a part timer. And I think up front on the D line, where you're expending so much energy on any given snap, that makes even more sense. And they have depth, so that makes even more sense. I did my roster projection post draft, which is always fun to do because it's the first time you're really sitting down with fresh eyes, looking at close to a 90-man offseason roster. And obviously we'll be doing a lot more of those once we get into Latrobe in July and August. But that D-line room, I was pretty much throwing darts at the wall, Chris, to figure out who's going to round out that unit. They kept 8 last year because they had some roster juggling. That wasn't a true 8 people on the 53-man active roster to start the season. But I would think they'll probably roll with 7 this year because it's going to be tough to cut down to 6 when you've got young guys who, unfulfilled potential for now, but probably don't necessarily want to give up on all of DeMarvin Leal, Logan Lee. I've seen people suggesting Yahya Black isn't going to make the team. I'd be stunned. I think
absolutely not.
I think taking him in the 5th round where they did, that showed me that they've got a plan for Black right out of the gate, at least to be in the mix and not subjecting him to waivers after cutting down the roster. So I had him as a lock, and I think 1 or 2 commenters were surprised by that, or emailers. But hey, where they took him and with who was still on the board, I would bet a lot of money Yahya Black's making this team as long as he's healthy.
Same here. You don't take a guy in the 5th round like that, at that spot. They're trying to replenish their defensive line ranks. If anything, if Yahya Black doesn't work out right away, they'll stash him on the roster and they'll protect him. They'll let him develop over, say, an Isaiah Loudermilk, who was a 5th round draft pick and has been given several years to figure that out and was brought back this year for that. But yeah, I'm right with you. I think Yahya Black sticks around. But it's again, curious, Chris, your point.
To see if a bulked up Logan Lee maybe has a role. I talked to him at the end of last season, and obviously he pretty much redshirted along with Logan
Yeah.
Wilson and Troy Fautanu and Ryan Watts, who now we know is probably done with football forever,
Unfortunately.
unfortunately for him. But yeah, Logan Lee, if he had some mass to him, maybe he can help out against the run. It is going to be fierce to try to get a job between Lee, Loudermilk, Liao. Well, 3 L's right there. Lowry, Dean Lowry, 4 L's. Probably at least a couple of them are going to take an L, because I also think Daniel Equale, the
Yeah.
contract we gave him, nice little signing bonus. He's probably going to be here, I would think.
Again, to your point, it's a very much a big question mark who's going to make the team as far as the D line and where the priorities will be there. But I think Yahya Black's in the mix. I think Derrick Harmon's high up in the mix. But who gets those next rotations? Right next to Harmon. Is it Black? Is it Equale? Is it Loudermilk? Is it Lowry? They got, like you said, all the L's. Liao's is back for one more year. Lots of options there, but that's why I think it's fun to explore that position. We'll do more.
Equale is like that classic veteran that they signed, and it's like, okay, Derrick Harmon, like this is the first boss, or I guess the first boss you have to beat would be like, Esezi Omatowewo. I'm sorry, I butchered his name, but like the lower level veteran. But then it's like, all right, you get to the end of training camp, or maybe even in the
could have
regular
picked
season.
Anybody else.
Then it's like Daniel Equale is the final boss, and then you can become more of a regular in the rotation, kind of like Mark Barron was in 2019 for Devin Bush and various other first rounders over the years.
Absolutely. Brian, thank you. We're going to be back in a sec here because we want to talk about these undrafted free agents. For as much time as we're talking about the guys that were picked, we haven't spent much time talking about the guys who weren't picked but were signed. We'll talk about those next here on the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Chris Carter, Brian Batko. But first, I want to remind you, this show is brought to you by UFC Gym. We're now into May, but with May being Mental Health Awareness Month, you also want to make sure that you're taking care of your body at the same time. That's where you go to the gym. At UFC Gym, you can reduce your stress, you can work on your body, and that helps you maintain a healthy mind. However you want to blow off steam, they've got the options there. They've got boxing, kickboxing, Zumba, MMA, HIIT, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, muscle makeover, spin, yoga, cardio, core, bar, youth classes, and silver sneakers, and so many more things for you to participate in. Get ready to feel stronger inside and out by dropping in at UFC Gym in Market Square or on the waterfront today to try a class for free. That's UFC Gym Pittsburgh. We're back here on the North Shore Drive podcast on the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Chris Carter, Brian Batko. Brian, let's talk about these undrafted free agents here. The Steelers signed their first group right away after the draft, as they normally do. Address some of the positions they didn't really look at too hard in the draft. Wide receiver, got 2 of them in Rock Taylor out of Memphis, Keshawn Williams out of Indiana. They got a tight end in DJ Thomas Jones out of South Alabama, Aiden Williams, a guard out of Minnesota Duluth. So like smaller ticket guys. They also got JJ Galbraith out of South Dakota. But 2 of the bigger signings that I think Pittsburghers might recognize, one is from Pittsburgh, and that's Ben Sauls, the pit kicker, who has the second longest kick made in Acrisure Stadium / Heinz Field's history this year when he hit a game winner. I believe it was against, was it Virginia? I'm mixing up my games now. But it was a tight game where they won because of a blocked field goal at the end.
I know they lost to Virginia. Pitt definitely lost to Virginia last year. Yeah,
it wasn't Virginia. I forget who it was. It was like their last win of the season. It's gonna come to me. But point being, no, that was really early in the season.
Oh yeah, that was like week 2. Yeah.
Yeah, and that was in Cincinnati.
Cal.
It was Cal. Thank you. That was it. You think I didn't cover the team last year? But there you go. Ben Sauls.
You really were watching future number 1 pick Fernando Mendoza slinging the ball for Cal.
Exactly.
That's train, baby.
There's the hype trains. You do believe in hype trains. Get out of here with that. But then I think the biggest signing that a lot of people raised their eyebrows at was Sebastian Castro, the 5'11" safety out of Iowa. I predicted him as like a 4th round pick. So I think getting him as an undrafted free agent is an interesting look there. Brian, was he the guy that spoke the loudest to you, or was there anyone else that caught your eye?
No, I think he's definitely the one who has the best chance. I mean, these are the kinds of guys undrafted who have made the Steelers roster in recent years. Think about Beanie Bishop as a slot corner and special teamer who's experienced and seasoned coming out of college. As I always say, playing 5 or 6 years at the collegiate level hurts your draft stock, helps your ability to help an NFL team right away and make a team out of camp, because you've got a lot of reps and snaps already under your belt. And that's a leg up for that 52nd or 53rd roster spot. James Pierre, kind of similar, coming out of Florida Atlantic, and he made it as a backup corner and special teamer in 2020. Even going back to Mike Hilton, he wasn't a priority free agent signing by the Steelers, but he was undersized, but a hard-hitting guy who carved out a niche here. So those are the models that Sebastian Castro should want to follow. And you do turn on his video last year from Iowa, and he flies around. He plays with reckless abandon. He already does have a handle on that slot position now. Does he have the ability to actually cover guys one-on-one in the NFL? I don't know. That's probably why he didn't get picked in all 7 rounds. But a reader from Iowa named Mike sent me an email saying, obviously he watches the Hawkeyes a lot. All the guys recently since 2018 who've played that position that Castro had, I think they call it the cash. It's like a hybrid safety, linebacker, slot, whatever. Yeah. Amani Hooker for the Titans, Dane Belton for the Giants, Cooper DeJean for the Eagles. He eventually moved, of course, to outside corner, and now Castro. So all those guys have had NFL careers. Maybe he'll be the next one.
Maybe, and I think that's what your hope there. And again, undrafted free agent. If he doesn't work out, oh well, you didn't lose anything because of it. But I think the projection there is that they added the safety they really wanted in Juan Thornhill. Like they have their 3 safety rotation, but they need to have somebody on hand that if they develop over the next year or two could fill in as a spot there. Miles Killebrew, of course, is that guy right now, but he's more of a special teams guy. Castro has the potential to be that in the box kind of guy that helps underneath coverage, helps against the run. He's a physical player. I like that projection, and I think those are all good comparisons you brought up there as far as that cash position. So if he fits in there, it's a very niche fit, but that's what you're getting with the undrafted free agents. Heck, that's what you're getting with after the 4th round. You're really getting these niche fits. I think that's a solid fit there as far as what they tried to do with getting Castro and the undrafted free agents.
At that slot position, Chris, I think Castro would be like the old school banger against the run. Brandon Echols would be kind of your best cover guy because he played outside so much with the Jets, and Beanie Bishop ideally would bring you the best of both worlds. Let me know. I wrote in the roster projection, I'm not convinced they're going to just hand a job to Beanie Bishop, starter or backup. I'm not either. I mean, I know he had a good rookie season with the 4 picks, but I think you and I both agreed when we were doing the podcast last year that he was up and down in terms of playing assignment sound football and being able to run with bigger, taller, faster guys at the NFL level. So I think he's going to have to go take his food too in training camp, as Carl Dunbar said.
Absolutely. I think he's going to have to prove a lot. I mean, they didn't get Echols for nothing. I think that he's going to be in the mix there. Castro's a threat there.
Dante Kent too. I mean,
Dante Kent is a slot guy.
He was actually drafted. Castro was not. So
neither was Bishop.
The Steelers have a slightly higher opinion of Kent. Granted, he also has punt return ability. But yeah, I mean, they could have completed the Big Ten novelty draft by going 7 for 7 if they would have just given that spot to Castro. But obviously, Kent was pretty hyped to get drafted out of Central Michigan, so good for him.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's going to be really interesting to see that slot battle and to see there. And it's clear the Steelers don't want to invest high into the position, but when you're not investing high into it, you're going to take several whacks at it. And I think that's what they're doing right now. Is just they've got Kent, they've drafted Castro, they signed they signed Beanie Bishop last year, so they've got Kent, Castro, and then they got Echols. So there's like 4 guys now that can legitimately compete at that spot, and that way it's like, hey, you hope that you hit with one of them, and if you do, there's your answer right there. There's your Mike Hilton for the future. Because that's what Mike Hilton was. Mike Hilton wasn't no highly drafted player. He was a guy that they signed undrafted, worked out. They're like, hey, there's our slot corner for the next 3-4 years. And if they can hit on that again, that would be a big win for the Steelers, so that they can keep investing in other positions in their defense.
And I've seen people, to go back to Ben Sauls for a second, wonder why he would want to sign with the Steelers. Well, Chris Boswell, I mean, he is, as we know, he's kind of a silent assassin, stone cold killer. I know Christian Kuntz likes to joke about, he'll hear it from Boswell if he screws up something with the snap or whatever. But, he doesn't kick a ton in training camp in the preseason. So Ben Sauls will get a chance to get reps and get preseason tape out there to the other 31. It worked out for Matthew Wright once upon a time, and he's still in the league. So plus he's doing it in a stadium that he knows, a facility that he knows. He probably likes Danny Smith as a special teams coach. And if he can get Boswell to be a little bit more warm and friendly than we see from him generally, he can get some wisdom and tips from the best kicker in the league right now. So I think it probably makes sense for both sides. Obviously, the value for the Steelers makes sense. You probably got the best undrafted kicker to your team. So if anything were to happen to Boswell, knock on wood, at least you'd have Sauls in there who has a lot of experience kicking at Acrisure and just a good guy too. He'll
Yes, he is.
seamlessly fit into that 90-man mix. The other UDFA who I think has maybe an outside chance is DJ Thomas Jones from South Alabama. I haven't watched him, but just knowing that he apparently does, he's listed as a fullback by the Steelers, so he apparently does some of that stuff. And we know that Arthur Smith didn't have that last year. He was running Ben Skoranek through there at times. That's how desperate he was to have a lead blocker for some of his plays, and how, I guess, uninterested he was in using Connor Heyward in that capacity.
No, yeah, I think that could be a mix there. Another thing to keep in mind of Ben Sauls, even if Chris Boswell doesn't go on, there's always a kicker that gets injured in preseason. That could be the move there, is that if he wows in the preseason and someone calls the Steelers like, hey, so what, can we get that guy? We kind of need him right now. Like, it won't get you a whole lot. Maybe you get a 7th round pick out of that. And then you're like, hey, we recouped something there. But no problem taking Ben Sauls and just having him as an insurance in case something happens with Chris Boswell. But anyways, those are your undrafted free agents. We'll see how these guys come into rookie camp. That's coming up in a few weeks here. We'll be there live for that. But as always,
a week from today, I think, Chris.
Wow, you're right. It comes up so fast.
It does seem like it's still draft week for some reason, but
I haven't moved on
after the draft. So I guess the draft hasn't been finalized for a week, so still technically kind of draft week.
Still kind of draft week, yeah, because technically it was Saturday. So yeah, either way, rookie camp's right around the corner. We'll keep getting you ready for that here at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Chris Carter, Brian Batko, thanks for tuning into the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. As always, you can find the show every Monday, Wednesday, Friday on your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoyed. Subscribe to this channel to get all of your Monday, Wednesday, Friday episodes of the North Shore Drive podcast, as well as daily content that comes out from all of our sports writers here at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. We'll see you Monday back here on the North Shore Drive podcast. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. If you watch this video on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to our channel. For all the sports coverage from the Post-Gazette that we have to offer, visit post-gazette.com.